Imagine the absolute shock, the profound grief of losing not just your leader, but a prophet. It's midday on a Monday in 632 CE. The Prophet Muhammad has just passed away, and the early Muslim community is instantly plunged into this dramatic political vacuum. Now, out of respect, you won't be seeing any physical depictions of these historical figures in our explainer today, but I want you to really picture the sheer weight of this moment. Without a clear succession mechanism triggered right then and there, the entire stability of the nascent Islamic State is literally hanging in the balance. In this explainer, we're going to focus on exactly how early Muslims navigated this incredibly high-stakes 24-hour crisis using a fascinating political mechanism known as the Bay'ah. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap. 1. The Islamic ruling contract. 2. A crisis of leadership. 3. The debate at Sakitha. 4. 2 types of pledges. 5. Prioritizing the state. And finally, 6. Legacy and modern applications. Section 1. The Islamic ruling contract, defining the relationship between state and citizen. So, before we look at the historical action, we really need to understand the theory behind it all. The Bay'ah. Now, you might hear this translated casually as just a simple oath of allegiance. But, as the source material makes perfectly clear, it's way more comprehensive than that. It is a binding citizenship contract. It's the actual ruling mechanism governing the relationship between Muslims and the Islamic State. Think of it like a mutual agreement. It explicitly outlines rights, duties, and the consent to be governed. Authority doesn't just, materialize out of thin air. It has to be contracted. And entering into this contract? Well, that requires a highly qualified leader. Take Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who emerged as the first Khalifa. His resume was practically unmatched. He was rigorously tested on all mandatory conditions for leadership. His strength of ideology was unquestioned. He was explicitly promised paradise. His capability to rule was forged directly under the Prophet's administration, serving as a wazir, an emir of Hajj, and an army commander. Plus, he met the crucial additional conditions of the time. He was from the Quraysh tribe, he was a mujtahid capable of independent reasoning, and he was a brilliant strategist. He literally checked every single box. Moving on to Section 2, a crisis of leadership, the 24-hour political vacuum. Because even with someone that qualified waiting in the wings, the transition was far from automatic. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because things moved at lightning speed. Monday midday, the Prophet passes away. By Monday afternoon, community leaders are already concluding a Bay'ah of contract at Sakifah. Fast forward the Tuesday Dhuhr, the midday prayer, and the general public finalizes the Bay'ah of obedience in the mosque. It's only on Tuesday afternoon that burial preparations actually commence. The urgency here is just palpable. Leaving the state without a pilot for even part of a day was heavily disliked. They absolutely refused to let that happen. Section 3. The debate at Sakifah. Negotiations for unity. This whole rapid timeline hinges entirely on an impromptu, high-stakes gathering at the courtyard of Banu Saida, also known as the Sakifah. Looking at the attendees, you've got a really fascinating cross-section of early Islamic political factions. The Ansar, the helpers from Medina, are represented by leaders like Sa'd ibn Ubadah and al-Bashir ibn Sa'd. Then you have the Muhajirin, the immigrants from Mecca, represented by Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Abu Ubaidah. So we're looking at senior tribal leaders, wazirs, and military commanders, acting objectively as a sort of early electoral college, converging to solve a massive constitutional crisis. But the solution wasn't obvious right away, and tensions were definitely rising. Fearing marginalization, the Ansar put forward a proposal. O Quraysh, there should be one ruler from us and one from you. Now, this dual leadership model was well-intentioned for sure, but it presented a massive risk to the structural integrity of the state. A fractured leadership could easily mean a fractured community. And this is exactly where Abu Bakr's political genius shines. Umar had actually prepared a whole speech to address this very proposition, but Abu Bakr stepped up and spoke completely spontaneously. He masterfully validated the Ansar, praising their massive contributions, but firmly insisted that leadership had to stay with the Quraysh to maintain absolute, undisputed cohesion among the Arab tribes. He even offered up Umar or Abu Ubaidah as alternative candidates. Umar later said it was brilliant. Abu Bakr hit every single point Umar wanted to make, but with far greater wisdom and patience. The climax of this tense negotiation hits in a split second. Fearing a major disagreement is about to break out with voices rising, Omar acts decisively. He tells Abu Bakr to hold out his hand.
Omar immediately pledges his allegiance to him. The second Omar extends his hand, the tension just breaks. The Muhajirin follow suit, and then the Ansar, one by one. Unity is preserved.
Section 4. Two types of pledges, contract versus obedience. Now, let's slow down just a bit to appreciate the structural brilliance of what just went down.
What's really interesting here is the profound dichotomy of the Bay'ah. It's essentially a two-part constitutional process. Phase 1, the Bay'ah of contract, happened Monday afternoon by a small representative group of tribal leaders and viziers, an electoral college nominating on behalf of the Ummah. Phase 2, the Bay'ah of obedience, happens the very next day. This is the general public directly ratifying the decision by shaking Abu Bakr's hand, and the provinces doing the exact same thing via their governors. It's nomination by representatives, followed by absolute public ratification. Section 5. Prioritizing the state, the consensus of the Sahaba. This swift action brings up a profound historical and theological point. Remember how the Prophet's burial was delayed until Tuesday afternoon? Classical scholars like al-Haythami don't view this as negligence at all. They see it as a definitive consensus, or ijma. Securing the state's leadership was considered such a preeminent obligation that they prioritized it over the deeply vital obligation of burying the Prophet. They knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the very survival of the state depended on immediate, unified leadership.
It's also absolutely crucial to point out that while prominent figures like Ali ibn Abi Talib and Zubair al-Awwam weren't present at the Saqifa for the initial contract, they fully endorsed the outcome. They freely gave the Bay'ah of obedience later on and voiced zero opposition to prioritizing the state's stability over the immediate burial. Across all factions, the overarching commitment was heavily focused on the unity of the community.
Section 6. Legacy and modern applications. Transposing the Saqifa to today. So how does this 7th century history actually inform modern statecraft? So the crucial takeaway is how adaptable the Bay'ah really is. The Saqifa model is essentially an electoral college in action. Today, you could easily transpose that to an elected House of Representatives, like a Majlis al-Nuwab, voting on behalf of the people, or, as we see in later successions like Uthman's, a state could use a direct general election where all citizens vote. The core requirement stays exactly the same. Political authority must be contracted through the consent of the governed. 24 hours. That is literally all it took. Think about that for a second. From the heartbreaking loss of a prophet and a seemingly insurmountable political vacuum, to the complex negotiation of a constitutional contract, and finally the public ratification of a new head of state. It's an absolutely astonishing feat of political resilience. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to chew on. We talk constantly about modern democracies, constitutions, and social contracts today. But how do the dynamics, the efficiency, and the representative mechanisms of this 7th century Bay'ah compare to the citizenship contracts we live under right now? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable piece of history with me. Keep asking questions and keep learning.